Gonna dust off the microphone here to return to the Fenway rundown after a what feels like a very long time away. I'm Chris Cotillo. Sean McAdam is here as well after holding down the fort by himself the last few days. And this is the Fenway rundown with the Red Sox less than 3 weeks away from the end of their season. Big win last night over the Baltimore Orioles as we enter the day here on Tuesday and another game against the Orioles tonight at Fenway, which we'll have covered for you. The Red Sox are 3 games back of a wild card spot. They are behind the Twins, but they are also tied with the Tigers and the Mariners at 73 and 71, and Fangraphs gives them an 11% chance of making the postseason, up from 6% yesterday. So these things are jumping around. We are, Sean, in the heart of September. There's plenty that's happened on the website, obviously on the pod the last couple of weeks, even without me away in North Carolina. Chris Russo is here, and you and Chris Smith did a fabulous job manning our Fenway Rundown Insider text portal as well.
Yes, and if others would like to join us and see what a great job that we are doing, well, that's just okey doke with us. It's easy to join. All you have to do is text the word join to 617-751-6257 and then click on the link to subscribe. You will be given a free 14-day trial period to hunt around and see all the benefits that come from being an Insider Text member, which include breaking news, lineups, communicating with us, asking questions of us, providing questions for future mailbag editions, and so on. After that 14-day trial period, we will then deduct, with your permission, $4.99 from your checking account or savings or whatever you deem necessary.
Great. Well, thank you for the very convoluted ad read there. I
read?
Yeah.
I think not.
No, it's memory because we have been pushing that all season and enjoy the conversation within that I have not logged into that in like 2 weeks, which is fine. That'll change today. I've missed a lot in terms of game coverage. Smitty did a great job in that whole trip to Detroit and the Mets. We'll get to a lot of what happened there in the clubhouse, especially, and off the field. Weekend series against the White Sox. Everybody knows 2 out of 3, which felt like the worst 2 out of 3 ever. And then a big win last night. You wrote was kind of a blueprint for how they can, win games. And I think it's Ian Brown, a good friend of the program and every program, tweeted, first time in a while the Red Sox have gotten an easy, comfortable kind of blowout win. Feels like they haven't had one of those in a while where they could breathe. And that propels us.
And they have not had many games where they've had both starting pitching and offense clicking together.
Right.
We know that the offense took a vacation there for the final couple of weeks of August. It proved almost fatal. It almost knocked them out of contention because they couldn't score. The starting pitching, which I think might come as a surprise to a lot of people, has actually been very good for the last couple of weeks. I think the number is 246 over the last 14 games. Good enough to win the majority of games if you're getting any offensive backing at all. Too many times they were not, but they did last night with the dozen runs. Brian Bayo kind of shaky at times in the first inning, certainly. Pitch count ran up there, only got 16 outs, but he did get them into the 6th inning and only allowed 2 runs, and most of the time you'll take that too.
As if I was somebody dropping back onto Earth after not paying attention, which is oversimplifying it. But I have been, watching from afar and reading and all that type of stuff. Are they dead or are they alive, Sean?
Well, if you look at their situation in a vacuum, you'd feel fairly decent about it because 3 games out with 18 to go is hardly insurmountable. And a key component is the fact that they do have a 3-game series with the Twins, who can't beat anybody. And that's one of the frustrating things for the Red Sox is that they haven't taken full advantage of the Twins' slippage here over the last couple of weeks. A point at which the Twins have lost, I think, 15 of their last 21. Mm-hmm. And somehow the Red Sox haven't been able to get much closer than 2.5 or 3 games out. So in a vacuum, 3 out with 18 to play and a 3-game head-to-head meeting with the team you're trying to catch, pretty good. Not so good, as you mentioned, the Mariners and Tigers are right there with you. And so you don't only have to make up ground and catch the Twins, you have to hope that both of those other teams stumble because you're done with them. You don't have any more games head to head with Seattle. You don't have any more games head to head with Detroit. So that complicates matters. I mean, still alive, but it's crowded, and that doesn't help.
Uh, the Tigers, with a couple of cupcakes on the schedule we saw over the weekend, that's not always a guarantee, but just getting into who these teams are playing. The Tigers finish with Colorado, as we know, a bad team. A tough stretch of Baltimore, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Tampa, which is very tough before finishing with three against the White Sox.
I mean, how is it that we are 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks to go in the season, and the Tigers and Orioles have not played at all?
Right. There's
That's
a lot of
absurd.
that kind of weird stuff going on. Seattle has San Diego, Texas, the Yankees, Texas, Houston, and Oakland. So kind of up and down there. The Twins have the Angels for two more, and the Reds in an easy week. Then the Guardians, the Red Sox, and then kind of a tale of two halves of the final series with the Marlins and the Orioles. And the Red Sox, of course, finishing with the Orioles, a tough trip to New York and Tampa. The Twins when they get back here, the Blue Jays, and the Rays. So, I think the Red Sox schedule is maybe a little tougher in terms of no cupcakes compared to the rest of those teams. But I think, if you look at it, each team has challenges and each team does have kind of that soft spot. The Red Sox, if you want to consider the Blue Jays that, even though, they just dropped 3 out of 5 to them last week or 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah, I mean, the Blue Jays and Rays are not invested in this race anymore. But I think you always have something on the line when you're playing a team in your division. It helps the Red Sox, in my opinion, if the Orioles and Yankees stay close down the stretch, because one of those teams is going to get a bye in the first round by winning the division, and they have something to play for. So when those teams are playing Detroit later on, that helps because they're motivated to continue to win games, and they will field their regular lineups and not be running kids out there and treating this as kind of a tune-up. So that helps the Red Sox. But ultimately, they've got to take care of business. They've got to win this series with Baltimore. They have to, at worst, get a split with the Yankees and then start beating up on Tampa Bay on the road, sweep the Twins, or at least take 2 out of 3. If you don't win the season series, you've got to finish ahead of them. So you have to keep that in mind. But the fact that the Orioles and Yankees will have something to play for, in my opinion, helps the Red Sox cause down the stretch.
And a very long time ago in early May, the Red Sox dropped 2 of 3 in Minnesota, which is something that, every game matters, obviously. They lost the first 2 games of that series and won in a blowout on the Sunday finale, and that could come back to hurt them in a couple of weeks. There's a lot of new faces. There's been a lot of kind of roster movement the last few days. Trevor Story is back. Rich Hill is gone. I do want to touch on a point that I think is pretty interesting that they were a little late on the uptake with, and they have been for some time, is getting some of these younger guys up. Not your premier top prospects, not Roman Anthony, who's now the #1 prospect in the game, not Marcelo Meyer, who's hurt, or Teal, or Christian Campbell, but some of these other guys who have had pretty good years. It feels like it takes a lot for them to finally get the call. We saw 2 of those over the weekend with Luis Guerrero and Richard Fitz. We saw that, it seemed like Cora wanted Nick Sogard, not that he's lit the world on fire, but Cora wanted Nick Sogard up earlier. It seems like there's a real hesitation to promote guys, and finally they're turning the corner to see what they have. And as Cora said, there's a little bit of assessing the future here with all the love in my heart for Rich Hill, who was a super guy and had a super career. It's kind of easy to look back now and say, why didn't they just pull up Luis Guerrero or Richard Fitz like 2 weeks ago instead of, trying that with a guy who's almost 45? And I think that these guys probably should have gotten opportunities a little bit earlier. It'll be interesting to see down the stretch who else might get a little bit of audition here.
Yeah, I mean, some of the calculus here is not all of those guys are on the 40-man roster,
Hmm.
which
But
is what.
as we've seen, there's not that many. There's a few spots that you can clear pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there isn't. And as tough as it was for Bobby Dahlbeck to get DFA'd with 2 weeks to go in the AAA season, we all saw where that was headed in the offseason. He clearly was not going to be back next
Hmm.
year or not back in part of anything. So that made some sense. But it does get a little more complicated with the younger players, the Campbells and the Anthonys, where you don't have to have them on the 40 yet. And you want to get them on now for, 10 games down the stretch, and in the process have to take somebody off and potentially lose them. So a lot of it is roster management. But I agree, in general, they've been a little slow to anticipate some of that, and probably could have done a better job making room for some of those guys at least a little earlier in the season.
Yeah, to me, there's a lot of DFA candidates. There's going to be a lot of free agents coming off. Heading into the year, Phil O'Neill, Pavetta, um, Jansen, and Martin kind of jumped off as your free agents, but now Sims, Garcia, Danny Jansen, Paxton, all these guys are going to be coming off. So there's going to be kind of room, and we saw Fitz and Guerrero added. We've seen Sogard and Boozer and some of these other guys throughout the year, Sugart, guys like that. So that does seem to be an audition piece of things. I do want to, and this is a tough to drop in a week later and give my thoughts on the whole thing. I think it's worth revisiting the Rafael Devers thing from Citi Field. I was not there, and I think I committed one of the cardinal sins that I try not to do, which is logging on to Twitter during vacation and actually, chiming
You
in.
asked for it, you got it.
I know. Chris Mason, as he was going on a long vacation earlier this summer, said even though the Patriots might have been making roster moves, our good friend on the Patriots beat for MassLive said, "I'm actually deleting Twitter from my phone for the entire time I'm gone for 10 days." I said, "Wow, that's amazing. I should have done the same." I did not. And obviously, the Devers thing, which I know you touched on with Lauren the other day on the mailbag, came up. We talked about this, when I checked in with you over the phone during the week, that anytime that we kind of touch on that, people view it as media whining, media complaining. We're complaining from a personal standpoint. And I kind of understand where that comes from because we feel, or it feels sometimes like we're just complaining about being inconvenienced. I think this has opened up a really, really, really interesting discussion that's pretty nuanced that I want to get into with you, as briefly as we can, but still touching on some important points. You've been covering the Red Sox since the late 80s. You've seen tons of superstars coming through here. Rafael Devers is that. He is a superstar. He has the biggest contract in team history, all that type of stuff. Um, what is the historical role of the leader to talk in big picture situations? Why? Can you explain to fans why that's important? And also, the question that I have is, with this emphasis on mental health, and this is just something that I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks, an emphasis on mental health, all that type of stuff. He was clearly very down after a tough loss. Is it antiquated, or should it still be fair game? Because I think that's what fans are asking. And I have my ideas, but I want to get yours.
Yeah, I think it is still important for key players, veteran players, face of the franchise players, which Devers definitely qualifies. Let's put aside the leader thing because that's not something that he's necessarily embraced. But he is the most well known, the most accomplished, and the highest paid player on the team. And with that, I believe, and I think you do too, that there comes a responsibility to be available to us. We're the conduit to the fans. I think most fans want to know. They want to hear from the best and top players on the team during difficult periods. It doesn't mean that he is responsible or that it's necessary for him to be front and center in front of cameras and notebooks 162 times a year. But when the team is flailing, as they clearly were in New York, as they were winding down a very disappointing road trip, to me, there's some accountability there. And it's not about, as you hinted at, that we demand that Rafael Devers answer our questions, but there is a responsibility that's understood within the clubhouse dynamic that Nick Sogard should not be responsible for addressing the plight of the team, nor should Romy Gonzalez or
Ref Snyder's the real topical example here.
right. But I'm saying that there are a lot of players in there who are not expected to deliver to the degree that Devers has. And when I say deliver, I don't mean on the field. We understand that players are not going to come through in every big spot, and that Devers was going through a difficult time for him in terms of performance. Part of that related to the shoulder issue that has definitely hampered him at times. But I think there is an expectation that the most well-known players, that the best players, that the players who are expected to produce on the field are also expected to speak to us and address what's going well, what's not going well, give their point of view and perspective. And it seems like too many times Devers sees that as a bridge too far, that he's being asked to comment on the struggles of the team too often. And frankly, that's not true. But there are times when it's falling apart, as it was at Citi Field last week, that it's incumbent upon Devers to represent the rest of the team and speak in sort of commensurate with his standing about what's going on. And in my mind, too often this year, he has sidestepped those responsibilities. I don't know how much of that relates to the language issue, where Devers does not feel comfortable yet. Maybe we're never going to get to this point of answering questions in English. We know, you and I know, I think most viewers now see that he understands what's being asked of him, and I mean that in the literal sense. He understands the questions being asked.
He's completely fluent and conversational in English.
Yeah, but he is not yet comfortable enough to answer those questions in English only.
Something
so the
you
team
can,
has a translator
in my
there.
opinion, you can never fault anybody for that. And
yeah, no, I'm not being critical here.
I know. I'm just covering our bases.
Yep.
That's not the gripe.
Right. I'm just wondering how much of that is a factor here, where he's not comfortable answering in English. It requires a translator, who is always on hand. We should point out that by dictum of the commissioner's office, teams now have on their payroll and must have on their payroll people who are bilingual, who can translate for players. That's true for Latino players, and it's true for players from Asia, be they Korea or Japan. The Red Sox have both available, somebody to translate for Masataka Yoshida and a full-time person on the PR staff who is bilingual and helps translate for Spanish-speaking players. I don't know if that's part of the calculus here. If it is, it would seem that that having a translator and someone whom he knows and with whom he's comfortable should take away that inconvenience. But I wonder if it makes him a little more reticent. I think it speaks more to Devers's personality, where he's not necessarily outgoing and doesn't enjoy that role of being unofficial team spokesman. But that's part of the responsibility that comes with being the most famous player, the highest paid player, and the player who is most well-known and accomplished on the roster.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the famous video a few years ago when he's with Tim Hires, and he said they pay me a lot of money and I hit homers. Like, I think that's how he looks at it. He does an unbelievable job at that. And I think, even with the struggles the last few weeks, like, he has been, excellent this year. He is, worth the contract. He's been, really a superstar and an underrated guy, as I've said a billion times. But I do think that the precedent is what's so important here in this discussion of guys stepping up and being in that role. I covered Xander Bogaerts for the last 4 or 5 years of his Red Sox tenure. I tweeted the other day that my tweet was that Xander Bogaerts was about 100 out of 100 on the leadership scale. After tweeting that, I realized I don't really know that because I only see the one side of that leadership where he did take every question and was accountable and was ready to face the music and speak big picture. I think that's, how Rafael Devers leads is clearly different in terms of posting every day, in terms of going out there every day. Bogarts did that, and he answered the tough questions, and he was candid, and all of that stuff. And as Devers' mentor, Bogarts also kind of had those expectations that he was passing on the baton. There is an expectation, there is this narrative going on in Red Sox world right now that the Red Sox never wanted to make Rafael Devers their leader, that they never expected him to be their vocal leader, that they never thought he'd take up this mantle and replace Bogarts, and that we as the media are retroactively throwing this title on top of him just because he makes the most money. And I'm going to push back on that one because the proof is just in quotes that people have given over time. Last year in spring training, after Devers signed the big contract, Alex Cora said this. He's been locked in with the team the whole time. I think obviously the relationship with Heim is a little bit different now, just his input and where we're at. He's the same kid. He's just getting ready to play. But Rafi, that's the thing you guys don't know, speaking to the media. He's been a leader of this team for a while here. When he talks in the clubhouse, it's important to those guys. The way he goes about his business, it's important. Scouting reports, he talks about it. So yeah, now for everybody else, this is the guy, but he's been one of our guys for a while. There's obviously other stuff that comes into play, and we've been talking about it. Like you're going to have more media responsibilities. And Cora then said Devers is definitely up for the challenge. Xander Bogaerts on this very podcast last May when I caught up with him, or in April when I caught up with him in Atlanta. Xander Bogaerts said he can be the leader, the vocal leader. The reason I say it is I was super impressed by the way his English improved, the willingness for him to want to learn. The reason he can become the leader is because he puts in the effort and he wants to learn. That's something that's in him. He's always been that way, and you can see the results. You wrote a column in spring training this year when he talked about, the Red Sox needing pitching, needing more, that he was beginning to warm to the role of team leader and that he was willing to be candid. And I think we were all a little bit surprised. Sean, you wrote this line. It's the clearest sign yet of Devers growing into the leadership vacuum that has been created as one veteran after another has exited, either in trade or free agency. Even before he was asked whether he was disappointed by the team's failure to improve the roster more, Devers acknowledged that he has some responsibility to serve as a team leader. Behind the scenes, away from the media, there's been growing evidence of Devers emerging as a leader and spokesperson. Diatribe continues here. Devers in spring training says, I don't think it's something that I really like, that title of leader, but it's something I need to embrace because I know that I'm one of the veteran guys in the clubhouse. I know I can help with my experience. I can help the young guys to become better baseball players, help the organization become a better organization. So the idea that they never had this idea of being a leader for him, I think is fraught with peril. They do, and he has done that on the field. And I can report and I can tell you, not from a media whining perspective, but there are people in the front office, as I tweeted last week, while away from everything, and butted in when I was off. There are people in the front office that have acknowledged that it is a big problem in their eyes. They want this guy to be their face of the franchise. They've set up different, things and media opportunities and stuff for him and an effort to do that. And he has not been as cooperative as the organization has wanted. There was talk in spring training that they had a six-figure payday ready for him to do a simple advertising spot, and everybody got ready, and he didn't show up because he was just, not super excited about, being in that role, being the forward-facing person. And I think Alex Cora wants him to do it more. I think the organization wants him to do it more. And whether it's his personality or not, the fact of the matter is that this is the reality of what's expected with the role. It's not the
Yep.
media complaining and whining, and because a lot of people had a good point on Twitter. Actually, I'll acknowledge this. They
Whoa,
said they
hold on.
said
I got to sit down.
I know they said, what are you going to get out of Rafael Devers in that moment? That's going to be super illuminating. And you know what? In a situation like that, and there's times where Bogarts was this way. I'm sure other guys in the past that you cover, whether Ortiz, Pedro, whoever, in a despondent time where the team's flailing, maybe it's the cliches. We just need to be better. We're not performing. We got to get back on track. Are those quotes going to be illuminating for the fan base? For us, no. But the point is the going through the motions of it, which made me ask that question, is it antiquated? Which I think we both agree it's not. And I think the organization, most importantly, and they're not going to put their best player on blast by saying that, but I think the organization, most importantly, thinks, hey, this guy's got to step up. And to the points we were talking about, this has been an issue that the organization has recognized since the first road trip. Rafael Devers made a big error in Anaheim and was the on that first trip, and everybody requested him, and he didn't talk, and people were like, "Oh, that's kind of strange. Like, probably just a bad night. Hopefully, that doesn't continue throughout the season." The media didn't blow him up. They didn't make a big deal out of it. It was not a story quite like it was with them in Citi Field last week, but the organization began to take notice. And so I think it's a fascinating kind of, we're not the people that people want to hear complain about this. But the reality is that within the organization, there's a wish that he would be more vocal. And I do think that this has been, a fascinating thing to discuss, in these
Well,
times of media consumption the last week.
let's use the word that I think better applies here. When you say, if you were filling out this sentence, I wish that Rafael Devers would be more dot dot dot, not of a leader, but accountable, publicly accountable.
Available.
Uh, yeah, I mean, we're kind of the same word, but
Hmm.
that reflects his status as a player in the game, his tenure, his service time, his star quality, his salary, all of those things. And my last point is you can't pick and choose which of those numerous roles and responsibilities that come with being a player of that stature. Pick the ones that are easy and say of the ones that are more challenging. No, I don't want to do that. If you are a player who is being paid more than $30 million, if you are the face of the franchise, and he can not like that, but that's what he signed up for,
Hmm.
quite literally, when he signed the contract, then he doesn't get to say, I want to do number 1, 3, 5, and 6 on this list, but I don't want to do 2, 4, 7, and 8 because those are harder or those are uncomfortable at times. Well, it goes with the territory, all of it.
Well, he can pick and choose what he wants, and he
Well,
clearly has, but there's
he
going to
he
be
he
backlash that comes
shouldn't.
with it.
He should not.
And I'd also think that, just, to clarify one more time, it's way more nuanced than saying this guy is a good leader, this guy is a not a good leader. Rafael Devers, by the way he plays, the way he posts, good leader, unbelievable player. He has left in the minds of the people who are running the show over there much to be desired in the way he has handled his media obligations, not offers or opportunities, but obligations this season. And that's the fact
Yep.
of it. That's why it blew up last week. Um, and again, I think a very interesting kind of, inside baseball type of discussion, but hopefully some nuance there that clarifies it. One more thing I want to get to, and this has also been a topic of discussion since it was brought up last week, Netflix and what that documentary has become, from the eyes of those of us who are around the team. I think the fans were, not sold. That's not the right word, because they didn't buy anything yet. But told that there was going to be kind of a 24/7, 365 documentary on the Red Sox this season. The Netflix camera crew was there all the time in spring training and April, and then it has really faded to the point where there have been weeks at a time, road trips, full homestands at a time, where they have not been around, including for some very, very important moments. I don't have a ledger here of exactly what they've missed. They were not in LA and Colorado on that super important road trip coming out of the break in which Cora got the extension. The Red Sox wanted to fight the Rockies, as we reported. They were not in Anaheim for Trevor Story, getting hurt early in the year, and he's expected to be a key figure because he's such a key figure for this team. There are a lot of things, and I know you have reported on that in the last week, but my takeaway here is that this is going to be, um, you know, like really tailored to getting to know certain players who gave really good access and they followed their story, and less the story of start to end the 2024 Boston Red Sox. That has to be the takeaway.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to predict what the final product is going to be because not only have we not seen it, but it hasn't been put together. And that will come once the season is over. I would imagine there's been some editing and putting things together as they go in real time. But this is not going to be publicly available until next February or March. Um, so it's going to take a while to see what the absence has meant and what the finished product is going to look like. What's clear is that they were gone from the team, apart from the team for a period of about 3 weeks. And that happened in the middle of August until just recently over the weekend where the crew returned. I can say that that was entirely financial, that it was a budgetary issue that has since been addressed and corrected. I really can't say much more than that based on some information that I was given on background, but they are back and intend to be with the team for a good chunk of the final 3 weeks here. How they address in telling the story of the 2024 Red Sox, their absences, not just the trips that they missed earlier in the year, which I think was always part of the equation. There was never a promise that they were going to be at every game. The feeling was they were going to be at just about every homestand and selected road trips. But their absence for 3 straight weeks as the team nosedived out of contention, and as you said, a bunch of stuff happened that they weren't present for, is going to be difficult. I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, that I have been interviewed for this documentary, I think 3, if not 4 times for extensive periods. I don't know how much of that is going to be used. Frankly, that's not my business. They asked me, I gave the answers I gave. Whether it ends up on the cutting room floor proverbially, or whether I'm all over it, I won't know anymore until we see the finished product in February. But it's clear that they've gone through some challenges that were financially related, that have been addressed now, and we'll see where this ends up.
Did you plug the Fenway Rundown Insider text during any of your interviews?
Probably. I can't remember. If I haven't, I will.
Um, just kind of looking back at the road trips I've been on early in April, they were, I think, in Seattle, which you were there, did not do the rest of that West Coast trip. In April, they were around a lot at Fenway. They went to Pittsburgh because there was a couple guys, Boozer being one of them, making their major league debuts. Some cool stories. In May, when Tyler O'Neill went back to St. Louis, they were there for that because that was a big deal in St. Louis. We didn't cover it much because Cardinals fans are not our audience, but it was a big deal, and he homered and the whole thing. I don't remember them being, they definitely weren't in Miami for that road trip. I don't know if they were in New York for that one, but it's been.
I think they were in New York and not Miami.
Yeah, LA and Colorado, no. Texas and Kansas City, where you were, no. Baltimore and Houston, where I was, no. And then a lot of time on the homestand, I think around the trade deadline, they were. When Jarren Duran gave his apology after being suspended, they were. But I don't think it's close to like they're there for like 75% of the games or 80% of the games. I think right around half total. And compared to what we saw from them in spring training, where they were there a lot and everywhere and really setting the scene, partially for trust reasons and partially for content, I thought it was going to be a lot more. And it'll be interesting to see, again, as you said, despite starring in this show, you don't know exactly, how it's going to come out and how it's going to look and if it's going to be any different than what they had planned on. But I think it's important that, if fans are expecting this 24/7, 365, because I see this on Twitter too, and I would expect this as a fan. We reported the brouhaha and the underbelly of Coors Field. Oh my God, I can't wait to see this on Netflix. This is going to be awesome. Not going to be there.
Right.
The final discussions with Cora, not going to be there. The like certain important days of the season. Like there are going to be things you're going to learn. There are going to be behind
Yeah.
the sscenes
Right.
things, but it's not going to be 100%. And I think fans
Right. And
starting to
I
understand
think
that.
I don't know that was ever billed as such. There were, there was the promise that there were going to be some behind the scenes stuff and
Yeah.
a embedded look for a while, but I don't think they ever billed it as the definitive look inside the Red Sox 2024 season. It was supposed to show you what a Major League Baseball team goes through from start to finish. Start being spring training, finish 3 weeks away, maybe longer. Who knows about the postseason? And I'm sure there'll be some compelling looks and stories and angles that they uncovered, some of which we don't even know about. Some human interests, some anecdotal stuff, some funny, the players being real human beings away from the ballpark, showing their personality more than perhaps they show us. All those things can still be done, but it is not going to be a embedded, we're going to show you every interesting aspect of the 2024 season and what went on behind the scenes, because they were not there for all of that. And as I
Mm-hmm.
said, I think it's important to note that that was never part of their goal or mission statement here. It was to show what a baseball season is like, not to necessarily record every single bit of news and development every day for 180 something days.
And the unprecedented access thing is absolutely real. The security guards
Yep.
that we know at Fenway and we see every day. I asked one of them really early on in the year because we're in the clubhouse for 50 minutes every day pregame and for as much time as it takes to get whatever players we request on after the games. But I asked one of the guards. I said, "What is the deal with Netflix?" He said, "Anywhere, anytime, entire ballpark." And that is
Yep.
really what it
Yep.
is
They're
when
they're
they're
in the
around.
trainer's room. They're in areas of the clubhouse that we are not allowed. But to be clear, we're not whining about this. This was part of an exclusive deal that was agreed upon by the Red Sox and okayed by Major League Baseball. But they have far more access to the players and the team and the personalities around the team on the team plane, charter plane, hotels, behind the scenes, trainers' rooms, areas that we're not allowed. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. But it is different than the access we have on a daily basis, drastically different.
Right. And so again, I'm going to be fascinated to watch this thing. I guess from what I thought it would be to what the reality is likely going to be based on what I've seen over the last few months, different. And I think it'll be interesting and fascinating for sure. That's
Yep.
a long, complicated, hopefully nuanced Fenway rundown because there are some things that I wanted to get to, and I know it's a little bit late, but that is the schedule we have. Red Sox back at it against the Orioles tonight. Two more here, and then I go, as they do, on to New York for 4, and then they go down to Tampa for 3. Where is the best place, Sean, for fans to access all we have about the Boston Red Sox and their doings?
Well, that would be the Red Sox Insider Text Program, Chris, which you can join by texting the word join to 617-751-6257. And then click the link to subscribe. You will get a free 14-day trial period to see how you like it. We think you will a lot. We think you'll like getting updated news first, lineups posted, questions answered, and questions provided by you to us for future mailbag editions.